Hey y'all, and welcome back to the pod. You know, I tell my students all the time that your brain will convince you that you have your thoughts and things together when in reality you just don't. And you try to put those things down on paper and all of a sudden nothing makes sense anymore. This kind of happened to me for today. I've had this on the plan for a while for July 4th. It's a children's biography of Abraham Lincoln. And then I realized that Abraham Lincoln has absolutely nothing to do with the 4th of July. He's the Civil War, not the American Revolutionary War. And I somehow convinced myself that he was an important figure in this. But I guess it's kind of like in Tolkien, the War of the Last Alliance. You have the War of the Last Alliance, but when you refuse to destroy the ring, you know that you have to eventually have the War of the Ring. And so the same thing, right? Revolutionary War, Civil War, and then our upcoming Second Civil War. But without Lincoln's resolve, his steel, his charisma, we don't have a country today, if we still have a country today. So I'm going to go with it. I think it still works. Though I can't help but think that in this analogy, I've somehow created Abraham Lincoln as the world's tallest hobbit. Either way, I am very excited to jump into this book, and I will see you after the break. Welcome to Toddling the Stacks, a human-produced children's literature podcast for adults. I'm your host, Sean, an award-winning educator with a PhD from Princeton English. In my professional life, I think a lot about the Victorian, the environmental humanities, and the history of the book. But in my personal life, I'm the father of a toddler, and she reads hundreds of books a year. She's taught me that everyone should be reading picture books, and this podcast will show you why. All right, so today we're going to be looking at 1939's Abraham Lincoln by Ingri and Edgar D'Aulaires, which the publisher recommends for grades 3 through 5. That makes it a little advanced for my little girl Adeline, but it is the third book to win the Caldecott Award, and so this is our third installment in the Caldecott series, and we had to read it. The D'Aulaires are famous for their children's work, which includes a fair few of these sorts of biographies, but also gets into imaginative books about the troll legends of Ingri D'Aulaires' native Norway. And one of these is their 1972 Book of Trolls, which was recently named an essential book to read before the age of 10 by the New York Times Style magazine, so they're still very operant in the zeitgeist today. For today's episode, we didn't look at the first edition of Abraham Lincoln, but rather the 1957 one, which claims that the author-illustrators redrew everything, absolutely everything, in order to take better advantage of emergent print technologies. And I think this is probably around color, right? The original is a work of lithography, clearly, and by the time of 1957, there are much more advanced techniques available in offset color printing that would allow color illustrations that would make the work more vibrant, more accessible for kids at a much, much lower cost. Thankfully, this one is available entirely on the Internet Archive. The link for that is in our show notes, so you'll be able to look at it alongside of me to see exactly what I'm talking about. I do have some questions there about redrawing an entire work, especially given that the Caldecott Award is given to books that are the best illustrated works of their year. You know, if we're redoing all of that work completely, are we not creating a new text? Am I even reviewing the third text to win the Caldecott? I don't know. But I'm going to give them a little grace and just assume that this was a reprint to add some color and move on from there. So looking at this, I want to think about the Caldecott series at large, because we're now 3 books in. We're starting to have enough data points that we can get to a straight line. We have the first winner of the award, which was Animals of the Bible. And remember, if you watch that episode, this was a book that is just huge, bloody chunks of the Bible, right? Huge, massive text that vaguely are related to animals in some way. And the conceit through which this book was brought together was that, well, children love animals, and children should love the Bible. So if we illustrate all of the instances of animals in the Bible and present them alongside the text of the Bible, that will get children to love the Bible as well. And there's no attempt to turn that into something that's more accessible for children. It's just the straight-up King James Version in their face for whatever age group that's meant for. And so real problems there with the text, but the illustrations are intensely good. They're just absolutely gorgeous. So it makes sense that an award that is required to not look at the text at all might give this award to them. The next book that wins is Mei Li by Thomas Handforth, and if you watched that episode, you'll recall that I absolutely love this book. It's about a little girl who goes to the Chinese New Year celebration in her hometown, even though girls aren't allowed to go there. and ends up having a series of adventures. And Thomas Handforth really uses lithography to kind of explode her world and allows for these full-page spreads that we haven't been seeing much of before this. And it just gets us into her imagination, into what she is seeing, into the lived experience of her as a child in a way that's super exciting and just very well done. Robert McCloskey is the only other artist that's getting close to this. And so really great illustrations for these first two awards, like stellar illustrations. And then along comes Abraham Lincoln by the D'Aulaires. And I find myself asking, why did this book win? And it's a hard question. If you go onto the Internet Archive and you take a look at this, the art isn't bad. It's not anything like the previous winners, however. And it's not anything like texts that are going to win in the coming future. I mean, Robert McCloskey's Make Way for Ducklings is very close to this text in terms of time. I don't want to say that it's amateurish, but it definitely evokes some sort of outsider art and very primitive art. And there are definitely things that I want to talk about in terms of how that works within the value of the text and the values that this biography is attempting to instill. But as a winner of an award for illustration, I'm wondering if the committee had trouble seeing past the text and just looking at the illustrations. And if you'll recall from our previous episodes, this was something that they recognized that they were having problems with and had to bring in the award's creator to sort of help clarify for them. And I think they still had problems with it when they were picking for Abraham Lincoln. And this is another thing that I work with my students on. If we're teaching the history of the book or the material text, one of the things that folks instantly have issues with is not looking at the text itself. They want to look at the words. They want to search for meaning. It's what we've been programmed to do since grade school. And it's very hard to get past that impulse and to only look at the physical text itself. And I think this is what happened here, is that it's very hard to just look at illustrations when there is a text presented alongside. Naturally, these two go together. They form a much broader world. It's the real value of picture books. But Caldecott, I think, is having issues with this at this point in time. But anytime we have a breakdown in the system, it helps to give us insight into how that system operates and what is happening there, right? Any errors that are produced allow us to see more about the process itself. And I think this is really valuable here because I think we start to see a straight line forming for this committee. It's a committee that seems to, throughout these three texts, really value Protestant work ethic, Protestant values. And it's starting to, and we'll see this more next time in the Caldecott series, it's starting to really value an anti-urban sentimentality. One of the things that really happens in Abraham Lincoln's early life is the constant moving from place to place because Lincoln's father can see the smoke rising from his neighbor's chimney. And this is a motto that he has for himself, that if you can see that, your neighbor is too close to you and it's time to move further into the wilderness. This anti-urbanity is going to continue on with this award as we move forward. And it's one of the things that I wanted to do in this project was to figure out what the values of this award are. And I think that this is going to help us get there. So, is this a book for your kid? Should we be reading Abraham Lincoln today in 2026? As a biography, it has its strengths and it has its weaknesses. Biography is not a monolith, right? This is something that every biographer comes to this with their own agenda. If you've ever read, and if you haven't read, you should read, Henry James's The Real Right Thing. This is sort of the central core of that story. All of us have a desire to hide something of our private lives, and it's the biographer's job to get deeply into our private lives and to expose them to the public. But if we attempted to do that completely, it would be impossible, right? Even like Forrester's Life of Dickens, which is kind of exhaustive in many ways, alludes a lot. We can't all have like an individual Truman Show about us, or that's all we would ever get done is reading the biography of one person's life. And the values of the biographer become very clear in what they include and what they exclude. And in that way, all biographies are kind of propaganda, but I think it's a necessary gating mechanism, as I've said. This one specifically teaches children that you can do great things regardless of the circumstances under which you were born. It's a text that starts with Abraham Lincoln's very early life and spends most of the time that it has talking about his childhood and his teenage years. And by the time we get to the presidency and the Lincoln-Douglas debates, the Indian Wars, all of that sort of thing, we're over 3/4 of the way through the book. most of the time is spent in much earlier situations. It eludes completely, almost, the Civil War itself, everything that Lincoln had to do to keep the Union together, the invasion of federal troops in Maryland, and all the work done in Lincoln's second inaugural address to keep the country together after the war, and the sort of recuperative work that needed to be done then. And of course, also, because it's a children's biography, we don't have anything about the assassination. The book just ends on Tad Lincoln holding Abraham Lincoln's hand. We don't have any of the bloody end there. What that does is shows us how Abraham Lincoln becomes who he is in time. The chances for anyone to become an Abraham Lincoln, of course, are infinitesimally small. But we learn through this biography that Lincoln consistently was interested in fairness. He was interested in education. He was interested in working hard. And not for nothing, sort of innate features, he was a very large man who was very strong, qualities that garnered him respect. We can't control those last things, right? But we can control the interest in fairness and equity and equality. We can control our work ethic, and we can control our destinies in a lot of ways, because we see that Lincoln comes from nothing and just grows up into something very special. And I think that that's a great thing to teach children, especially today, when we see so many avenues for them closing and the worldview becoming bleaker in a lot of ways, is that even the smallest person, to get back to Tolkien, can change the course of the world. And Abraham Lincoln teaches that. And this is where I think the art really does shine and work very well with the text. And again, it works with the text to do this, is that through these very primitive, very outsider drawings, we have something that is accessible to young folks, to very young folks who are just learning to do things like draw and color and represent their world in another medium. And you wonder if this had been something that had been drawn by a Thomas Hanforth or a Robert McCloskey, what that would look like. It would be much more inaccessible. It would be much further removed from them. And it would make Abraham Lincoln the sort of iconic character that children in America already know. And this is, I think, a special point. If you aren't an American, you've definitely heard of the name of Abraham Lincoln. But I'm not sure that I can really convey to you what the name means here in this country. Like, every child knows this man's accomplishments. Whether they think that they were good or bad, they know them. And this allows the D'Aulaires to focus not on those accomplishments, but rather on the things, the world building that we see before, and to provide these illustrations that really work well with that. And so in that sense, I think it's a great children's biography. It may feel dated for your kids, but if you expose your kids to a lot of various dates anyway, I think they'll get past that. It is, however, just the length of the text and the subject matter of the text. It is really for those older children. It's you're not going to get this through as a picture book for young kids. But I think that you should check it out. I want to end here on a slightly tangential note. As I started off with, this episode comes out shortly before the United States' 250th birthday. And I want to wish us a happy birthday. And I want us to hopefully focus on the lessons that this text can give us, that anyone can change the course of their future if they just believe in fairness, if they just believe in hard work, and if they believe in themselves, and importantly, if they believe in one another. Happy birthday to us. I hope you guys have a great week and a great celebration. And remember, another world is possible, friends. We just have to have the strength and the courage to build it together. As always, thanks for listening. Stay safe. Get your kids to the library and keep on reading together. Bye, y'all.
This has been Toddling the Stacks. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube or your podcatcher of choice for new episodes every Monday, and follow us on Insta, Blue Sky, and Facebook for the latest updates. If you like what you hear, leave us a review. Keep up with Adeline's reading now, find links to buy your favorites, and more at toddlingthestacks.com. Address questions or concerns to pod, that's P-O-D, at toddlingthestacks.com. Graphics for today's show were created by Emily Tatro. Make a website so people can hire you, Emily. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.